The purpose of the EIR is to identify the plan's significant impacts on the environment, to evaluate a range of reasonable alternatives to the plan, and to determine how the plan can avoid or mitigate any significant impacts. This is going to be a programmatic level EIR that will present a region-wide assessment of the proposed plan and alternatives and provide CEQA streamlining opportunities, as Ashley just described, related to transportation projects and programming, and development projects as defined by SB 375. Sorry. The EIR focuses on environmental impacts in particular. There will be 2 additional separate studies completed that will address the other 2 E's of sustainability. The economic impact analysis will be completed in the fall of this year, and will assess the economic impacts of Plan Bay Area, land use and patterns and transportation investments on the regional economy. And the equity analysis will be completed in early 2013 and will assess the equity implications of all the alternatives included in the EIR, as well as identify the benefits and burdens of land use impacts and transportation investments for different socioeconomic groups. In terms of the EIR itself, the process really begins with the notice of preparation and scoping meeting that we're holding today, and all of the feedback we receive during this period will be taken forward through the EIR process. The next stage of the process is data collection and developing environmental settings, as well as defining the project description, and also defining the alternatives and screening alternatives for usefulness and evaluation. All of those steps go into doing the actual environmental impact assessment, which evaluates a range of issue areas and then identifies any cumulative impacts, as well as impacts or analysis of the alternatives. We'll produce an administrative draft EIR and then a public review draft EIR, which we plan to put out in December of this year for a 45-day public review period with public hearings in January. And then we'll respond to all those comments in a final EIR document in March of 2013, and with the anticipation of certification of the final EIR in April of 2013. So at the outset of the process, what we really want to hear from you, we have some key scoping questions that we'd like you to keep in mind through the presentation, and when you make your comments, if you could consider in particular the following questions. What potential environmental issue areas should be analyzed? What alternatives should be evaluated? What types of mitigation measures should be considered that would help avoid or minimize environmental impacts? And what elements of this EIR would help your agency with CEQA exemptions and tiering? So at this stage, we've identified 13 environmental issue areas for evaluation as outlined in the notice of preparation. First of these is transportation, where we'll evaluate impacts to commute times and any increases in vehicle miles traveled. For air quality, we'll look both at short-term construction impacts as well as any impacts related to emissions of criteria pollutants and toxic air contaminants and their related health impacts, and whether or not the plan would conflict with any air quality plans or standards. For land use and physical development, we will be evaluating any impacts to agricultural land and open space, whether or not we conflict with any local land use plans, and any impacts to local communities by disruption, displacement, or separation. For energy, we will assess if there's any increase in non-renewable energy consumption or inconsistency with energy conservation plans or policies. For greenhouse gases and climate change, we'll be assessing any increase in net or per capita CO2 emissions from on-road mobile sources, any vulnerability to sea level rise, and whether or not the plan conflicts with greenhouse gas reduction plans, policies, or regulations. As related to noise, we'll be assessing any exposure to noise levels or ground-borne vibration in excess of standards. Geology and seismicity, we'll be evaluating whether a plan causes an increase in risk to injury or loss of life related to earthquakes, landslides, or ground failure, soil erosion or loss of topsoil, or increased development on expansive soils or weak soils. For biological resources, we'll be evaluating any adverse effects on sensitive or special status species, riparian habitat, wetlands, or other natural communities. And also if the plan would interfere with movement of identified species or conflict with adopted local conservation policies and resource plans. For water resources, we'll be looking at a range of impacts related to groundwater recharge, stormwater runoff, erosion, and risks related to flooding, siege, tsunami, or mud flows. We will be looking at impacts to visual resources, such as adverse effects on scenic vistas or scenic resources within a scenic highway or at the existing visual character of communities. We'll also be looking at sources of light and glare.